From a once famous rapper who boasted about earning millions of dollars from his viral hits to a legendary lyricist who rapped about financial wisdom but faced a costly divorce. These artists found themselves facing financial ruin due to reckless spending, toxic relationships, and expensive legal battles. All of these artists lost everything because of the women in their lives. Soulja Boy, you know him, you love him. And you've definitely cranked that to his 2007 smash hit Behind the Fame. Soulja Boy, who was born DeAndre Cortez, was just 17 years old when he released Crank That Soulja Boy. It was more than just a song. It was a cultural reset. Thanks to MySpace and YouTube, the song went viral before viral even existed, and everyone was doing the Superman dance. Soulja Boy became an overnight sensation. But here's the thing, he wasn't just a rapper. He was a pioneer. He was among the first artists to use the internet to blow up, and it paid off handsomely by the time he was 18 years old. The Soulja game life was good, and Soulja Boy was living it up to the fullest. He wasn't afraid to show off his wealth Rolls-Royce Rolex watches and ridiculously expensive jewelry, and he was throwing stacks of cash at strip clubs. He was the epitome of the young, rich, and reckless lifestyle. But this is where things get messy. While Soulja was busy showing off his best life on Instagram, expensive living, legal issues, and a series of poor choices started to pile up for Livy. And then there was Kayla Myers, who in 2019 filed a shocking lawsuit that would alter everything. She accused Soulja Boy of assaulting, kidnapping, and holding her at gunpoint during a 6-hour ordeal at his Malibu home. According to Myers, Soulja Boy threatened to kill her, tied her up with duct tape, and even hit her with a gun. In 2020, a jury decided in Myers' favor, ordering Soulja Boy to pay her close to $472,000 in damages. But here's where it gets crazy. Soulja Boy said he was like negative bank account. Broke Soulja Boy, the same. When the soldier's financial situation was revealed during the court proceedings, he acknowledged that his bank account was in the negative and that he was having financial difficulties. However, the worst part was that, despite his claims of destitution, he was still living in a multi-million-dollar home, driving cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and wearing jewelry worth $188,000. The judge wasn't buying it. In fact, he called Soulja out in the most cruel way possible, calling him someone who was as close to zero as possible. The judge said that even in Los Angeles, the defendant's lawyer claimed that these assets were part of his business as an entertainer, but the court wouldn't have it. The judge even suggested that Soulja Boy sell some of his assets to pay off his debts. But the problem is that even if he did, the $472,000 he owed Myers wouldn't be covered. This wasn't just about the Kayla Myers lawsuit or the boy's financial struggles. The judge said that $225,000 is a lot of monthly rent. The rapper's claims of being broke were shocking, especially considering his celebrity status. Here's a man who was once worth millions, living the high life. And now he's fighting to prove he can't pay a $472,000 judgment. It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can go south when you combine fame, fortune, and poor financial decisions. He had a $1 million tax lien hanging over his head, and he had been in and out of court for years over various legal issues, including probation violations and cryptocurrency scandals. According to reports, Soulja was able to pay the settlement, and a year later, the rapper's situation appeared to improve when he showed off his H. Warner Chappell Music earnings on Instagram, displaying deposits of around $1 million. After all the talk about him being broke, it appears that Soulja Boy is back in the game, releasing new music, staying relevant, and rebuilding his empire. Soulja Boy's reckless spending and legal issues almost destroyed his fortune, but he was able to come back to New Zealand on the. However, Nas was not as fortunate in his early years. His financial difficulties stemmed from an expensive divorce that left him struggling to get well. Before Nas was earning millions, he was a child growing up in Queensbridge, New York, one of the most dangerous housing projects in America. He witnessed daily drug use, crime, and violence. But instead of succumbing to the streets, he turned his suffering into poetry. By 1991, He was already drawing attention after he sang an unforgettable verse live at the barbecue in front of record labels. And by 1994, NZ released his debut album, Illmatic, to critics. Fans hailed it as a masterpiece and said it was revolutionary that NZ went from being a Queensbridge kid to hip-hop royalty overnight. With back-to-back hits like If I Ruled the World and Hate Me Now. Money began to pour in, and Nas was amassing millions of dollars, purchasing homes and jewelry, and living the life of a rap star. However, as his wealth increased, so did his commitments, particularly with regard to the women in his life. Long before NZ and Kelis, Carmen Bryan was the one who would introduce him to the costly world of child support. In 1994, NZ and Carmen had a daughter together, Destiny Jones. At first, everything seemed to be going well for Matic Dro that year. But as Nas's fame grew, so did his problems. Carmen wasn't just any ex. She was connected to some of the biggest names in hip-hop. And she would later confess to cheating on Nas with none other than Jay-Z, which fueled the already legendary beef between the two rappers. I had a relationship with Jay-Z, but the weird thing is that we were friends before anything else. If that wasn't enough, Carmen went on to write a book that revealed details about her relationships with both men, which added even more fuel to the fire. But beyond although the precise amount Nas paid over the years isn't public, she did require a book deal for NZ child support checks. Because raising a child as a single mother meant that he had to pay a lot. Carmen made sure she received every penny. But if Nas thought that paying for one child was costly, he had no idea what was coming next. Fast forward to 2002, when Nas meets Kelis Rogers, the Harlem-born singer of Milkshake and Bossy. The two hit it off right away. And by 2005, they were married. Kelis was a rising star, and Nas was still one of the most respected MCs. But their relationship wasn't always ideal behind the scenes. They had arguments, accusations, and toxic energy. Kelis later claimed that Nas was controlling and physically abusive, leaving her emotionally scarred. Nas, on the other hand, claimed that Kelis was manipulative and emotionally abusive, taking advantage of him at his lowest point. The breaking point came in 2009 when Kelis was expecting their son, Knight Jones, and she filed for divorce, claiming she needed to get a divorce. When the courts decided in Kel's favor, Nas was ordered to pay over $300,000 in child and spousal support. When he was unable to pay the full amount up front, he set his monthly payments at $50,000. That's right. Every month, Nas was writing Kelis a check for a luxurious lifestyle. His lawyers fought back, managing to reduce it to $10,000 per month. But by that point, the damage was already done. Divorces in Hollywood are never cheap. Uncle Sam doesn't care if you're going through a divorce. If you owe money, they're coming for you. In addition, the state of Georgia claimed that Nas owed over $1 million in back taxes with divorce payments, child support, and millions of dollars in tax debt. As if the divorce wasn't bad enough, Nas was about to face even more financial difficulties. The IRS was keeping an eye on Nas while he was battling court battles and child support. And in 2012, they hit him with a $6 million tax bill. Nas had no choice but to sell off assets, liquidate properties, and struggled to stay afloat by 2012. In fact, he lost his home, which he had purchased with Kelis for more than $500,000, as it was foreclosed and repossessed. Although Nas's collapse was one of the most shocking in hip-hop history, legends don't stay in financial ruin for long. In 2016, The Game made headlines not only for his music, but also for unintentionally revealing his wealth. It began with a charitable gesture when he promised to donate $500,000 to aid the people of Flint, Michigan, during their devastating water crisis. He wanted to show that he was a man of his word, so he posted a screenshot of his wire transfer to Iata Water. However, this is where things got interesting because he neglected to blur out his bank balance. And what did it say? $13. The Game had been in the business for more than 10 years. But many fans were unaware that he had millions in his account. In typical Game fashion, he used the opportunity to criticize celebrities. like Madonna and Jimmy Fallon for their $10,000 donation, saying it was cute but not nearly enough at the time. The game was still very popular at the time, and he had a lucrative music career. However, by 2024, things had drastically changed. So how did the game go from having millions in the bank to fighting? It all boils down to a lawsuit that won't go away. In 2015, Priscilla Rainey, a contestant on the game's VH1 reality show, allegedly groped him inappropriately while filming and filed a sexual assault lawsuit against him. In 2016, a judge decided in her favor, ordering him to pay $7. The game initially ignored the $1 million judgment, as many rappers do in similar circumstances. For years, he avoided court orders, refused to pay the settlement, and used every legal tactic at his disposal to have the case dismissed. Out. But the courts weren't playing by 2024. U.S. District Judge Mark C. Skark decided that enough was enough. The court was done waiting, and he allowed the seizure of the game's assets to cover the judgment, including his Calabasas mansion. He was a rapper who built his career on power, street, credibility, and success. So losing his home in one of LA's most prestigious neighborhoods wasn't just a financial issue. It was a major blow to his image. Now he was being forced to sell off his property like a struggling artist. But the $7 million judgment wasn't the only. His financial problems were made worse by the fact that the game reportedly lost over $100,000 in a car burglary. When it rains, it pours. And for the game, it was pouring legal fees, asset seizures, and bad luck. However, as the financial pressure mounted, rumors began to circulate that the game had discovered a new, dubious way to make money. According to reports, aspiring rappers started receiving DMs from the game's team, offering them the opportunity to be featured on his mixtapes for a fee of $500 to $1,000. Imagine landing a feature with Game B. But there was a catch. Rather than being featured on his verified SoundCloud, these rappers were put on random accounts with few followers, which had little to no exposure. The game wasn't even promoting the projects on his social media, and worst of all, he didn't even rap on the songs. Many up-and-coming artists soon realized they had been duped, believing they were purchasing a cosign from a West Coast legend. But they received nothing but false promises as fans, and the hip-hop community called him out for fraud. With his home at risk, his reputation on the line, and financial difficulties mounting, he's in a difficult situation. Unlike other rappers who reinvented themselves through investments or business ventures, the game hasn't made significant moves outside of music, and he won't if he doesn't find a way to turn things around. The game didn't directly address the accusations, instead posting screenshots of messages from happy artists thanking him for the opportunity. However, let's face it, screenshots can be cherry-picked, and people weren't convinced. DMX's story is a cautionary tale on a larger scale, where bad financial decisions, addiction, and endless child support payments ultimately left one of hip-hop's greatest icons in financial ruin. Few rappers in history have embodied raw emotion and street energy the way DMX did. His voice, his presence, and his pained lyrics made him one of hip-hop's most legendary figures. His influence stretched far beyond Mew from the moment of his debut. He could be facing a full-blown financial column because of his legal issues, which cost him millions of dollars. When DMX released his album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, in 1998, he demonstrated that he was a formidable force. The album sold 250,001 copies in its first week and went on to sell over 5 million copies worldwide. That was only the beginning. He went on to sell over 70 million copies worldwide with 7 studio albums, 3 Grammy nominations, an American Music Award, and even a successful film career. DMX should have been set for life, but history has repeatedly shown us that making money isn't the issue. He was born Earl Simmons, and his spending habits, legal issues, and personal demons soon caught up with him. His childhood was characterized by abuse, neglect, and trauma, and he turned to the streets at a young age. By the time he became well-known, he was already struggling with a debilitating drug addiction that would follow him for the rest of his life. Despite his success, he was never good with money. He led an extravagant lifestyle but neglected to pay child support because he had 15 children with multiple women. As a result of his infidelity and numerous extramarital affairs, his first marriage to Tashera Simmons collapsed. By the time they appeared on VH1's Couples Therapy in 2012, Tashera had already suffered years of heartbreak because DMX had fathered children outside of their marriage. She later told Essence magazine, "I still feel bad about getting divorced even after everything X put me through because I took my vows very seriously. But there just comes a time when you give your all and you know you gave your all, and it's just time to move on." But moving on didn't help DMX's financial issues. And by 2015, he was drowning in debt and owed over $400,000 in back child support. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail but was released after serving just 2 months. That same year, he was arrested again. It's time for not paying $10,000 a month in child support to Tashera. In court, DMX begged for another chance, saying that he needed time to rebuild his career and earn money. The judge was lenient and released him without bail, but the truth was obvious. At one point, DMX's financial problems were getting worse. He filed for bankruptcy in 2011 because, according to reports, his assets were only about $50,000 and his debts were between $1 million and $10 million. Then, in 2017, DMX was accused of 14 counts of tax fraud. ALLEGEDLY, hiding millions from the IRS by using false bank accounts and avoiding paying taxes on almost $2 million in income. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. And by the time he was released in January 2019, his debt to the IRS had skyrocketed to $2. The IRS wasn't the only issue over the years. DMX served time for a number of charges, including possession of weapons, reckless driving, drug possession, and probation violations. Each arrest made it more difficult for him to get back on his feet. And even though he earned millions during his career, his net worth was estimated to be negative at the time of his death in 2021. Years of poor management, legal fees, child support debts, and tax issues had completely depleted his fortune. But here's the thing, DMX's legacy isn't about money. His music spoke of pain, struggle, and redemption. And his voice conveyed genuine emotion and genuineness, making him one of the most adored rappers of all time. Although he may have died impoverished, his influence on hip-hop is incalculable. DMX's financial difficulties were closely linked to his personal demons, child support obligations, and reckless spending. But whereas DMX's problems were the result of long-term financial mismanagement, Iko Cyrus found himself in a similar situation, losing his fortune almost immediately by feigning the celebrity lifestyle. Had it all, or at least that's how it appeared after the Jacksonville artist made his breakthrough with his hit song. He acted as though money was no problem by taking women to the most upscale restaurants and parties, buying them designer handbags, jewelry, and shoes that he couldn't afford, and giving them cars and jewelry to make their relationships look like couple goals on Instagram. However, behind the scenes, his bank account was empty, and worse, the women he spent the most on weren't there when the money ran out. YK Osiris acknowledged that he blew through his first large check. Nearly Ahmed Med, or Once Worth It, blew up and the check began to roll in. Was making 6 figures from pay shows, getting feature money, and living like a superstar. "I went broke, so I got a quick man." Instead of saving money, investing, or developing his career, he went full celebrity mode. He gave his mom $250,000, which was a nice gesture, but it wasn't wise when you're still new to wealth. He also spent $300,000 on designer clothes, most of which he only wore once, and paid $400 for haircuts twice a week, spending tens of thousands on haircuts alone. Don't think about it, but once you do, you start buying everything. His financial decisions weren't just bad, they were unsustainable. This is why K. Osiris wanted to be a part of the elite hip-hop circle, which required him to gamble, flex, and try to impress the biggest names in the industry. He owed Drake $60,000 and had to sing his way out of the debt. He owed Lil Baby and Young Thug money from Bets Gone Wrong. French Montana clowned him at a party to remind him that he still owed him money. even after declaring himself debt-free on Instagram with piles of cash. At the age of 23, YK Osiris discovered the hard way that pursuing influence can lead to financial instability. His downfall was fueled by impulsive spending and gambling debts, but for mystical money. He later recalled that he still owed Young Thug when the IRS hit him with a $190,000 tax bill. This was the last straw for his flexing women lifestyle, which was all a facade. YK Osiris believed that money would make people love him, but in the end, he realized that fake friends only wanted to be around when the money was gone. Was drained by frequent legal issues, mostly involving women, which repeatedly ruined his career. Mystic was at the top of the charts in the late 1990s and early 2000s. With hits like Shake You and Danger dominating the charts and his albums selling like crazy. His 2000 album, Let's Get Ready, went double platinum, solidifying his position as one of the biggest rap stars of the time. He even received 2 Grammy nominations, and at his peak, he was earning millions from record sales, tours, and endorsements. In 2003, the year he received 2 Grammy nominations. Mystic Call's career took a serious hit when he was found guilty of sexual battery. He accused his hairstylist of stealing $80,000 worth of checks. And instead of handling the situation legally, he and his bodyguards forced her into sex acts that were filmed. Although he was living the dream with big houses, expensive cars, and, of course, a lavish lifestyle filled with all the excesses that come with being a hip-hop superstar, he was making reckless financial decisions that would come back to haunt him. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, which effectively ended his career at its peak. While incarcerated, his finances went completely out of control. He was unable to release any new music or tour. And the money quickly dried up due to legal fees, settlements, and lost revenue, turning what had once been a fortune into a financial catastrophe. By the time he was released in 2010, he had returned to his former self as a millionaire rapper. In an attempt to restart his career, he signed with Cash Money Records and tried to release new music. But he was accused of rape and kidnapping in 2016, which resulted in his spending 18 months in jail before the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, although he avoided another conviction. The damage was done because his legal troubles scared off record labels and promoters, making it nearly impossible for him to get back in the game. Financially, just when it seemed like he might have learned his lesson, he found himself in even more trouble financially. He was arrested once more in 2022, this time for first-degree rape, simple robbery, and felony domestic abuse. The accusations were unsettling. He had beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted a woman at his house after accusing her of stealing $100 from him. To make matters worse, he made her transfer money to him via a mobile app before allowing her to leave. At this point, his mystical financial situation was beyond repair. Years of settlements and missed career opportunities had completely depleted his bank accounts, and he allegedly owed millions in legal fees. Once a multi-millionaire rapper, he was now simply another example of wasted potential for more stuff like this. He had no significant sources of income remaining. Click on the videos that are displayed on your screen right now.